Okay, y'all, so good news, bad news. Good news, Recession Pop is back! In bad news, we might actually have a recession. Hey guys, what's up? It's Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. Today, we are here and we are talking about something that I feel like has impacted all of our lives to some degree, and that is kind of the political and economic state of the world right now. No Jaden Smith. But like, if you've been just a person in the world recently, like buying groceries, paying for your rent, trying to have a semblance of a normal day-to-day life, then you may have noticed that things have gotten increasingly expensive. The job market is increasingly more, como se dice, hostile and difficult, and it seems like things are not looking to improve anytime soon. And I think it's important and definitely time for us to talk about that, because like I said, these are very real issues that can and will affect all of us. So let's do just that. We're talking about things like what happened to the cost of eggs, to what happened to the job market, to what does this mean for us young people going forward into a society that seems strikingly similar to certain times past, and trying to cover all these things with a bit of levity and humor and things that don't make this as scary and nerve-wracking as I feel like it can be, and it usually is talked about and covered in. So if any of that sounds of interest to you, hi, I'm Rumi. If you're new here, definitely subscribe, would love to have you. And also make sure to leave a like on this video because it helps out a ton with the YouTube algorithm, and follow me on my socials at Imurgency on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, also at Imurgency. And also, if Spotify is more your thing, you can watch these episodes live on Spotify as well at my Spotify show at Imurgency. Click the link in my description to go check that out. But let's talk about what's going on. So in order to get to the more cultural things, I fear we do have to talk about some of the more political things, which I know is no one's favorite topic, but certainly a important one nonetheless, and I think it frames this conversation pretty well. So let's have a quick little economics light conversation really quick, because when we want to talk about things like a potential recession or times being hard economically for people, it's important to understand the systems behind them that create the situations that we're in. So it's no secret that we are currently in the position that we are in because of people's concerns and views on the economy, specifically towards presidential administration's performance on economy. That was a big voting point for a lot of people in this past election cycle. And I think now that people are becoming more so aware of what's really tea, specifically in relations to campaign promises versus execution, I think it's important to understand that when it comes to things like economy, generally the previous administration sets up the current economy that we are all experiencing. And when we talk about things like cost of living, grocery prices, and things like that, it's important to understand when these things started going up, which happened to be during the last administration. And, you know, if we go by the logic that each incoming president, each coming administration inherits the economy of the past one, when we talk about things like cost of living going up during the Biden administration, that would go to show that that administration was dealing with the residual effects of the prior administration, which happened to be the Trump administration. And during his time in office, President Biden did implement a number of things to try and counteract a lot of those residual effects, including the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which looked to improve the state of the economy and address things like the cost of living in an attempt to make things more affordable to everyday people. But if you happen to follow politics at the time, you would know that a lot of the core tenets of that act did end up having to get modified and watered down in different ways to have more widespread bipartisan support. And you can look at economic statistics for like how statistically the economy was doing after 2022 onwards, and you could see that things were on the up and up. Still not great by any means. Like, times have been hard for a while. But since then, we now have a new or a returning administration that has since paused / frozen parts of the Inflation Reduction Act through executive order, which definitely is a lot of back and forth. And in addition to the act being frozen, we also have a budding trade or tariff going on, with country exports receiving different levels of tariff, which, as we now know as a collective society, causes our prices to go up, and the customer, aka us, ends up paying more or paying for said tariffs through the rise in prices of goods coming out of said countries that are affected by the tariffs. With, as of recording this video, a 25% tariff on products coming from Canada and Mexico, and 10% coming from other countries, customers, aka us, are going to feel that burden. But we're not going to take a gigantic deep dive into all of that because I'm just simply not an economist. I just bring that up to say that it's really interesting interesting to see all of this be in direct contrast with what the campaign promises of this administration were in terms of bringing down prices, because that's just like not happening. And this all just really gives us a great context for like what's going on. And unfortunately, what is going on is inflation is still on the rise and the cost of living is still on the rise. And unfortunately, what that means is that a potential recession is not entirely out of the question. Kind of makes you wonder what's really going on, how do we get here, and where do we go? It's times like these that you really have to think about the most vulnerable among us, because they ultimately are the first people to be impacted and to feel a lot of the things that go on with the economy and the state of the world, which is one reason why I'm so happy to partner with this video sponsor, Bombas. Bombas is a comfort-focused premium basics brand with a mission to help those in need. They are truly a purpose-driven brand where for each item that is purchased, they then go and donate one item to those that are in need. Bombas has already donated over 150 million items and is truly a brand looking to make you look good while doing good. They primarily sell the top 3 things that are needed in things like homeless shelters, that being socks, underwear, and t-shirts. And let me tell you, they've been a long-term partner of this channel, and I swear by their socks, okay? I'm running the LA Marathon in a few weeks, and I have been using their compression socks religiously in my marathon training recovery. Truly life-changing, so I could actually walk around day to day after running 10+ mile runs. But if you're not a super athletic person, they also have your winter essentials, like their warm merino wool socks and cushiony Sherpa slippers. Merino wool has natural temperature regulating properties, so they're great to keep your feet cool while you're hot and also warm when you're not. Bombas also now offers international shipping. In addition to the US, they now ship to over 200 countries. So now it's easier than ever to get Bombas if you had not already been able to in the past. You can truly feel good and do good with Bombas, knowing that your purchase is doing some real good. New customers get 20% off their first purchase. Just go to bombas.com/emergency or scan the QR code on screen and use code emergency at checkout. Thank you so much, Bombas, for sponsoring this video. Let's talk about some of the things going on with inflation right now. So what's going on with the cost of eggs? I think eggs right now are the perfect example of inflation and of things going on in the world that are making life just a little bit harder, because eggs are a touch point that impact pretty much all of our lives, or for the lives of the majority of us. Shout out to my vegan brothers and sisters. I see you and hear you. Yeah. I don't know if you knew this, but like the cost of eggs has been high for a while, and it's actually only been getting higher.
There is no greater symbol of inflation in this country right now than the egg. The rising price of that oval object came up dozens of times in the battle for the Oval Office.
So it got our attention today when that most American of institutions, Waffle House, hit customers with, wait for it, an egg fee. 50 cents an egg.
It's the avian flu that's driving up the cost of eggs, and now more inflationary pressure. A trade China that could raise the price of a whole lot of other things.
The United States hit China today with a 10% tariff on all goods it exports to the United States. And China responded with tariffs of 10 to 15% on a narrow range of American products, including coal and gas.
Like, I think that it's crazy that we've gotten to the point where like eggs are so expensive that businesses are starting to surcharge for eggs. Like, what do you mean there's like an egg tax? Like, are we serious right now? And I understand that this isn't solely the fault of inflation. A large contributing factor also is because of the avian or bird flu that is going on right now in chicken populations. But also, if I want to be petty, we're also kind of just letting that whole situation rip, because like the administration is gutting the CDC and like health communications with the NIH and all that. Like, I've been seeing a lot of things about the avian flu, and I think we should definitely be doing more about that before things get a little bit more spooky. But in terms of just eggs for eggs' sake alone, the combination of the bird flu and inflation has been projected to increase egg prices somewhere to the tune of 41% in 2025, with the current national average for the cost of a dozen eggs being around $4.95. While I'm speaking specifically for California since I live there, the California average is around $10.27, which, in case you didn't know, is above minimum wage in some states.
Life could be worse. No, not really. This is the worst.
This is the worst.
This is the worst. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway.
And I don't want to say that this is just an issue in California, because it's not. This is an issue across the country. Like, eggs have been across the board more expensive and have sort of become their own like little pop culture moment in the zeitgeist, with a lot of people making joking content online solely about the wild price of eggs nowadays. Things like using eggs as a form of tip or payment, joking that egg dishes are the most expensive and luxurious form of meals right now, and so on and so forth, using this essentially as a way of like funny coping with the fact that a state staple for a lot of people's meals, are now becoming more so unaffordable. But while the jokes are kind of haha funny, you also kind of got to think like, this is kind of dystopian. This is kind of weird. Like you have people in high populated cities that live in food deserts who are waiting hours in line ahead of store openings just to get themselves a carton of eggs. I mean, even then, the price of these eggs are through the roof.
I needed eggs, so I woke up and got to Costco as soon as they opened, only to find this ridiculous line. Funny thing is, as soon as I got to the entrance, I realized I was in the wrong one. That's because at this Costco, there's a separate line just for eggs. And it was just as long as the previous line. So once you get through the entrance, you're good, right? Wrong. It then continues along the entire side of the store. Then you turn the corner and continue until you end at the entrance of the dairy section. Each customer was limited to 3 cartons. This 24-pack cost $7.69, whereas the nearest Walmart sells half of that for $8.32. So yes, justified deal from Costco as always, but keep in mind, it took me an hour to get this. And did my troubles end there? Nope. This is the queue of the self-checkout line. How are there so many people on a Monday morning? Does your Costco have an egg line? Let me know in the comments.
And I don't think it's a stretch to remind y'all of the dangers and harms of like scarcity mindsets and the power of what fear mongering can do to people. Like just think about what happened with toilet paper during the height of COVID. And while the costs of eggs are a specific indicator for the way that inflation is going, it does not fully encompass the scope of the situation because, you know, it's not just eggs that are getting more expensive. It's the entire grocery bill. It's the entire cost of living. It's everything that is getting more expensive and making things a lot harder to afford, which like, yay, shout out to minimalism, shout out to only getting what you need or maybe even a little less. I also think that it's very interesting that at the same time of all this happening, we're also seeing a societal and a cultural push towards more fit, active, and smaller body types and beauty standards again, similar to that of the early 2000s, which, you know, if we were to take a step back to look at what also was happening in the early 2000s economically, it is certainly a potentially coincidental parallel to draw. But in addition to things being more expensive, it's important to kind of talk about like, okay, how are people affording this then? Like if everything is so expensive, how are people affording? Well, the problem is many people aren't. And that is because a lot of people aren't necessarily working. And that's not to their own fault because over the past couple of years, we've been witnessing rounds and rounds of massive layoffs. We've been seeing a job market that is more difficult to navigate than times past. Like people are losing their jobs and struggling to find another job despite being qualified or even in some cases overqualified for the positions that they're applying for. Like just taking a trip to Reddit and hearing people's stories. Like you have people with master's degrees struggling to find jobs, even with entry-level ones in things like service and retail. And that's because no one is really hiring. And a lot of these major companies are just in the active process of firing or laying off people or incentivizing people to quit by bringing back things like mandatory in-office, increasing work expectations of lower employees to that of higher level roles without compensating them for that. Like you just have to type the word layoffs into TikTok just to see how many videos of people documenting or talking about their experience being laid off just in the recent days. And this is something that's happening across industries, like whether it's tech, entertainment, government, health, sciences, and beyond. Like this is touching every single industry. And the rate at which this is happening is alarming.
Watch me get laid off.
Hey Jordan, thanks for joining this call. I have Sandra from HR on here as well.
Am I getting promoted?
Not exactly.
I am so sorry. I got laid off yesterday.
It's all right.
What do you mean it's okay? I'm jobless.
And like I said, it has nothing to do with your performance. It just has to do with what processes are going to work best for the team.
Okay.
And while layoffs and the struggle to find employment are not inherently the result of inflation, everything is related and interconnected, so they kind of feed into each other. The cost of living is going up, employment is going down, people are being laid off. These are telltale signs of a pending or potential recession. And I know people get real spicy around the use of that word, but at the end of the day, we got to start calling a spade a spade. Like where the charts and the data may not specifically say yet that we are in a recession, we are definitely feeling the social and economic impacts day to day of that of a recession. But if we do want to talk stats and numbers, about 1.7 million people were laid off a month from September 2024 to December 2024, according to the US Bureau of Labor Stats. And while this was in 2024, it's anticipated to continue, especially with the massive restructurings going on in government right now, affecting not just those who work government jobs, but also government-funded jobs opportunities in those beyond. Like, just think of it as a massive ripple effect. In relation to that, we can look more specifically at things like the Meta layoffs that happened recently. Meta laid off approximately 3,600 employees under the pretense of them having low performances as a way to curb the unlawful termination lawsuits. And there was like a big controversy with that because, like, how do you go about determining who is a low performing employee and what does that look like and what does that mean across the company? Because metrics of success and performance vary from team to team, from industry to industry, and who is evaluating that. And because of this, people have been speculating that this mass firing was for Meta's bottom line, or to use to save funds to invest more into AI features like Meta AI, which can lead us to a whole different conversation if we want to go there, but we do not for the sake of this video. And the ultimate problem with this is that regardless of if these people were actually low performers or not, and honestly, if I speak candidly, I don't think that the majority of them were, because this was done so publicly, they are now marked for their next stage in their career as being a low performer. So when they're applying for new jobs and people are looking at their resume or they're in the interview process and they see that Meta was their most recent form of employment, there will already be a preconceived notion that this employee was a low performer, which is going to work against them in an already tough job market. Like, it just really shows that these companies do not care about their employees anymore. Like, whatever was going on in 2020 and 2021 was truly just for show. And that goes for the DEI initiative stuff as well, if we want to go there. According to a Forbes article, experts are predicting weaker employment records in light of these announcements. Ongoing shifts in the technology sector plus the shrinkage around white-collar jobs point to a restructuring of the US economy, with major potential impact for workers across multiple sectors of the economy. As the Trump administration moves forward with reductions in federal workforce, the number of Americans on the unemployed line is going to increase. And this is not good. And like I've been not so subtly hinting at, this compounded by the fact that we're in one of the worst job markets of recent times is definitely very telling. It's so normal for people to be applying to 20 plus jobs a day and not hearing back from a single one, or if they do, having it not really go anywhere because these jobs aren't actually hiring. And if they are, you have to go through so many different hoops for jobs that are just entry level. Like, I talked about the state of the American workplace in a previous video talking about how everyone hates Gen Z in the workplace. But like, to reiterate, if we want to be real, most of the descriptions for these entry-level jobs require you to have 3 to 5 years of experience in your field. And I'm like, how is that entry level? That's like mid-career. Because how is someone just graduating college or with 1 to 2 years of experience under the belt going to have that 3 to 5 years of experience that you're expecting from an entry-level role, giving an entry-level salary? So that sucks for both new grads and also for people that are unemployed or have been laid off that are later in their career that do fit in that qualifications, because now you're only qualified for an entry-level position, getting that entry-level salary when you have the experience and you have the worth and likely have been paid more than what you're getting for that salary. And like, to that point, if you don't have those 3 to 5 years, you should definitely still apply. But like, the competition now is so steep because as a young person, you are competing with people that are later in their career and competing with all the other people that have been released back into the job market from their layoffs. Like, it's a incredibly tough time. And that's compounded by the fact, I know I said this was going to be love and light and we're going to bring light to this, but we need to rant. I'm so sorry. But that is just compounded by the fact that, like, again, a lot of these jobs aren't necessarily real jobs. Like, certain people's jobs, like at a lot of these companies, some of these recruiters' jobs is to actually post fake job listings and to bring people through an interview process for a job that is either not real or a job that they already plan to give to an internal hire, but they have to interview people outside of the company for legal reasons. So I really get the frustration of many people who feel like this whole job hunt is, 1, a waste of time, and 2, a waste of energy. But like, what you gotta do? Because you gotta make money. Okay, let's I got that out. I'm sorry. But with that said, let's take on a more couth approach. Let's talk about some precedent, because as scary as this all is, and as novel as this may feel, and as novel as certain aspects of this are, generally when it comes to times of economic upheaval or economic uncertainty, we do have precedent for what that is, what that means, and how we can move through it. To do this, let's first take a look at the most recent example of when times really sucked economically, which is the Great Recession of 2008. And also, I do want to say, I didn't know that the history books were calling this the Great Recession, because this happened to be one of the things that I lived through as a child. I didn't know, and it's really weird because this is like one of the first times where it's like, oh wow, I'm seeing history be made in times that I've lived in. Because when I was living through it, I didn't know it was called the Great Recession. I thought it was just a recession. Apparently, it's dubbed the Great Recession of 2008. And according to a Wharton article, the Great Recession accelerated a number of trends and arrested the development of others. The fact that so many people took temporary jobs, often as contractors, was pushed along by the downturn, in part because employers were so unsure about the future, but also because workers had no choice but to take them. Good employee management practices took a big step back during this period because employees were willing to put up with anything as long as they had a job. And I think that this really resonates with times currently. Like, the Great Recession was a terrible time for millennials and for younger Gen Xers because the economy sucked. It was hard to get a job, it was hard to keep a job, and it really marked the start of the delay of later in life milestones that we see now take place today. Like, it's the reason why we see a lot of millennials, especially older millennials, take longer to own a home, take longer to start a family, take longer to have kids, because these different life milestones that were set in stone or were more so attainable for their parents and grandparents just weren't available to them because of this time of economic uncertainty and them having to backtrack and take whatever job they can get, regardless of if it was in their career trajectory or not. And I think we're starting to see something very similar with Gen Z. I think I was around the age of like Gen Alpha when the Great Recession was going on. Like, I was old enough to like see what was going on in the world, but not old enough to understand what was going on. Like, I think of those TikToks where like the parents of like Gen Z will be like struggling to make ends meet, and like in the other room are like the Gen Z kids playing on like Wii Sports Resort or something. Like, I feel like that's a real experience, and I think that might be the experience of like Gen Alpha now during this time of like economic uncertainty and like political uncertainty. But yeah, things are rough.
We have more and more people with productive capabilities, but technology has made it so that you need less and less people for actual work. So employers just dangle what few real jobs currently exist, and everyone else is left to fight over scraps in like the gig economy. People are also retiring later, which makes it impossible to move up the ladder of your career because the next logical step is already occupied by a 50, 60-year-old who refuses to step down, in part because we have made it so unstable for them to do so. Your real wages have stagnated while your necessities cost more and more, which decreases the power of organized labor.
But to speak more on the Great Recession, to build that precedent, the recession of 2008 captured a period of economic downturn from 2007 all the way to 2009, with, of course, the effects lasting much longer than that. And I think what we learned from that is that there isn't just one way to tell if there is a recession risk or if a recession is pending. It's more of a mix of a lot of things that become those indicators. Like, for one, you have the recession pop music. Like, you got the Lady Gagas, the Keshas, the Pinks releasing. No, I'm kidding, kind of. That could be a whole other video talking about recession pop. But you have real things like inflation. You have things like unemployment, mass firings or layoffs, solely for the sake of saving companies money, and things like the GDP decreasing. They say that one of the warning signs back in 2008 was that the employment rate rose to 5% in 2007, and by 2009 it was around 9.5%. And currently, as of filming this video, our employment rate is around 4%, which is a bit of a cause of concern given all the recent layoffs that have happened. I know I said I'm not going to get super economic, but I think I need to put on my dollar sign hat again, just really quick to prove this one point. But for those of us that aren't super tapped into economics, the GDP, or the gross domestic product, is the total value of all goods and services produced within a country in a certain period of time. And especially for consumer-based economies like we have here in the US, it's a way to gauge the economy's health. So unsurprisingly, back in 2008, the GDP decreased greatly. And why I say that and why it's relevant is because currently, for the first quarter of this year, the GDP is actually trending negative. And things, of course, are still subject to change, models can adjust, but economists have been predicting a further decline. So that, with the combination of the topics that we've been covering previously in this video, it's not looking great. It's not. And since the US is a consumer society where everything is sold all times, whether you're conscious of it or not, a soft indicator of a potential recession is oftentimes the absence of consuming things. So people stop buying big things like cars, furniture, travel, the more frivolous things, and instead focus more so on the essentials. So I really wonder how this is going to impact the TikTok shop, because I don't think anyone needs anything from there for real. But you know, I did say that we would talk about some good things eventually, and this is that. It's time to talk about our relationship with overconsumption. Yay! Because unfortunately, we cannot solve the plights and perils and the complexities of the United States economy in a single YouTube video. But what we can do is that we can remember as individuals and as a community that we are not inherently hopeless. Like, there are still things that we can do to make sure that we will be all right, or at least can make it to the other side. And I know it's super easy to fall into the doomerism of it all, but we do certainly have power in our dollars, and we have power in the decisions that we do make. Like, during times like this, it's important important to really take stock and have an honest look at our spending and our expenses. Like, yes, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, and yes, no one person can change entire structures set up against the people, but we have the power to choose where we spend our money, how we spend our money, and how often we do it. And when I say this, I don't mean like you don't need to spend your $8 on your fluffy latte with oat milk and your fancy flavorings. You can use that money to buy a house. More so, like, let's be mindful about our consumption, about what we're buying and what we're reusing, and being more resourceful with things like that. Like, it's become so normalized to feel like you need new stuff for everything, or constantly need like the most updated versions of things to stay relevant or stay cool or whatever, what have you. Not every cocktail party, happy hour, networking event needs a brand new dress, suit, outfit, whatever, what have you. And not every back to school season requires a brand new backpack or brand new supplies if you already have some from the previous year. Like, I feel like in times like this, we need to be more comfortable with being resourceful and grateful for what we do have, and be really okay with reusing or borrowing. Again, it goes back to that community thing. You see a video tie-in. If you haven't seen the video, you should go check that out. Or like borrowing from friends or people in your community. I really think really tapping into and building community in that way is one of the greatest forms of resistance and one of the greatest ways to make it through times like this. Like, especially in a time where we're constantly being targeted by things like ads, whether we're aware of it or not. Overconsumption has definitely become the new normal. Like, we don't need as much stuff as we say we do, or as is advertised to us.
I hate to be the one to say this, but the reason that the cost of living is so high, and the reason that regular household items and groceries continue to increase, is because we don't know how to stop purchasing things. We don't know how to say no. We don't have self-control. Like, if I think about history and why in history books people actually got like a little bit of change, it's because they had some sort of resistance, some sort of self-control. We literally buy. Amazon, TikTok, freaking Target, Fashion Nova, Shein, whatever the case may be. All of these stores always gets orders just coming in and out. At what point do we say no? At what point do we fight back? Because the reality of it is the government is looking at us like, okay, they're never going to stop. So why would we decrease the price on anything? Y'all need to just make some more money and fend for yourselves. But no, everybody has to have the latest everything. I don't know. But coming into the new year, January 2025, I will not be purchasing anything that is not necessary. And I say this and I'm holding myself to it because I am tired of eating my money. I am tired of wearing my money. It needs to go somewhere else. Who's with me?
Another thing you can do if you are in the position to do so, support local economies. Shop small and shop from places like farmers markets if you can. Directly supporting small and local business is a great way that you can make a small difference. Bartering, looking out for your neighbors, getting in contact with your neighbors. Like, if you happen to live in a place where you or your neighbors have things like fruit growing or a vegetable garden, like, be open to share and barter. Because during scary times, during uncertain times, community is where you should be turning to. Not in like a cult way. Don't turn to a cult. Like, please, actually. Because that also does tend to trend in times of uncertainty and scariness. If you feel like you're getting into cult territory, you probably are. So maybe double back and go somewhere else. Also, shout out to the de-influencing girlies, because we should be de-influenced from like buying the same thing in 50 different colors. Like, we don't need it.
Not gonna want to hear this, but I don't care. So I'm gonna be de-influencing you in 20 seconds or less. Let's go. You can go to bed in an old t-shirt and shorts. You do not need to be spending over $100 on a luxury pajama set. Traveling often over the span of a year is actually not as normal as social media has made it seem. So you should not feel bad because you can't afford to take 5 trips every single year. Weekly or monthly clothing hauls are not normal. Spending over $300 on a single shopping trip is not normal, and you should not feel bad because you can't do the same. You do not need more than 1 reusable water bottle. The concept of reusable water bottles are that you can reuse them. Why do you need 6? I actually hope this video ruffled some feathers and de-influenced you in one way or another. Comment down below one thing I mentioned that you actually agree with.
Especially when it comes to things like fear mongering or like anxiety inducing tactics to try and get people to buy things that they would not necessarily want to or need to on their own. Like, yeah, we need to leave that alone because that just is not going to fly where we're going. There are also movements going on where you can really put your money where your mouth is, like economic blackouts. I don't know if you were aware, but like on February 28th, there was like a day blackout from like buying anything from big companies who took away DEI initiatives initiated by the People's Union. It was great for empowering people and reminding people that there is power and value behind the dollars that they spend. And while it was just for one day, or it could have been seen as like delayed consumerism, doing things like that still are impactful because it is the first step in a longer term strategy of like decentering a lot of these companies that don't center you. If you're able to go without it for one day, it makes it just a little bit easier to go without it for 2, 3, a week, a month, and eventually until these companies start acting right and representing the values of the people that shop there. John Schwartz, the founder of the People's Union, states that this isn't just a one-time protest, but it really is the beginning of a shift in how people can demonstrate their power intelligently to the corporations and government. And this is all to say that yes, the price of living and the job market have been both increasing and decreasing in quality, respectively, and aren't inherently making life easier. But I think in that it's important to acknowledge what's going on and to be aware of what's going on, but to not let it make us lose hope. I think it's really easy to become hopeless or feel hopeless in times like this, but I think there are still so many things that we can do to make a difference. And having that hope really does make a difference. So it's time to look at those consumer habits, really understand the value of our dollar, and buckle up because we certainly have a time ahead of us, but we will make it through. But yeah, y'all, that's all I gotta say for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I know this is a little bit more of a serious conversation, but I felt like it was one that definitely needed to be had because it's something that I've been thinking about for a while, and a lot of people in my life have been as well. So I hope that this was helpful or at least affirming for you. If so, or if not, let me know what you think. Have you been impacted by any of the things that we've talked about in this video thus far? / what are you doing and what do you think is the right way to go to move through these times that are ahead of us? I would love to know all your thoughts down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're new to the channel, definitely subscribe, like on this video, follow me on my socials on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Check out my Spotify show by clicking the link in my description. Other than that, y'all, I've been Imurgency, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.